And it's like that. Fuck is you talking about? Welcome back. It's your host, Funny Cash Money. Fuck is you talking about? We finna get into Jodeci. Fuck is you talking about? Actually, they got a wild story as far as their life go. We finna see how this shit finna turn out, though.
Don't talk, just listen. What about you, baby? I'm a freak. So you're having my baby. I've been watching you. Every time I close my eyes, take my blood. It's been hours since you've been gone. Every freaking night and every freaking day. I can't leave you.
I'm sorry, I feel like my fucking ears is being raped right now. These motherfuckers, they done cut through so many fucking tracks. God damn. How many tracks they finna cut through? And they done cut through the same track, I think, twice. Man, fuck that shit.
Everyone around them knew it. Not what you think. They weren't just the bad boys of R&B. They were a ticking time bomb, and everyone around them knew it. At their peak, they had it all. Platinum records, sold-out tours, women throwing themselves at them. But behind the scenes, it was absolute chaos. KC and JoJo, out of control. Devontae, broken. Dalvin, barely keeping it together. And the worst part, it wasn't an accident. The industry turned them into this. Diddy, Andre Harrell, Uptown Records. They created the Jodeci image, pushed them into a wild lifestyle, and then left them to self-destruct. So how did four church boys from North Carolina go from singing about Jesus to becoming one of the most reckless, self-destructive groups in music history? And more importantly, who really destroyed Jodeci? Let's get into it. Jodeci was never supposed to be the bad boys of R&B. In fact, if you told their parents that their sons would one day be cursing on records, rocking leather, and showing up to award shows with machetes and grenades.
Yeah, because it's funny because KC, no, not KC. Yeah, no, KC was actually a fucking gospel singer before. As a kid, he grew up as a gospel singer. Actually, he was famous for that shit. So yeah, she actually got a point.
They probably would have sent you straight to church because before all the chaos, Jodeci was built on gospel. KC and JoJo Haley grew up singing in the church. Their family was full of gospel stars. Fantasia Barrino,
These motherfuckers.
Dave Hollister, Calvin Richardson, all blood relatives. Devontae and Dalvin DeGray, same thing. Their dad was literally a preacher, and they spent their childhood in church choirs. Their voices weren't trained in studios. They were trained in Sunday service. But when they stepped into the music industry, none of that mattered. Uptown Records didn't want church boys. They wanted stars. Diddy didn't want R&B gentlemen. He wanted R&B rebels. And Jodeci, they were young, hungry, and willing to do whatever it took to make it. So the industry flipped the script on them. Instead of dressing like a typical 90s R&B group in matching suits and bow ties, they got baggy pants, leather jackets, dark sunglasses. Instead of being promoted as romantic gentlemen, they were turned into street legends who sang about lust, not love. And instead of being protected, they were thrown into a world of excess, drugs, and money they never learned how to handle. And once the machine got rolling, there was no stopping it. By the time they released their debut album, Forever My Lady, in 1991, the transformation was complete. But there was just one problem. The image wasn't just an act anymore, because Jodeci, they were starting to believe the hype. And that's when things got dangerous. Here's the thing. Jodeci didn't just go wild out of nowhere. They didn't wake up one day and decide to throw away their gospel roots and become R&B's most reckless group. They were groomed for this. They were set up. And the people who were supposed to guide them, they were the ones pushing them toward destruction. It all started with their record deal. Jodeci signed one of the worst contracts in music history. At the time, they were young and desperate, so they signed whatever was put in front of them. Uptown Records and Andre Harrell, they had full control over Jodeci's career, and they made sure the group saw none of the money they were generating. But it got worse, because when Diddy got involved, everything changed. Diddy was young, hungry, and had a vision. And in his mind, Jodeci wasn't just an R&B group. They were a movement. They were going to be the anti-Boyz II Men. R&B wasn't supposed to be safe anymore. It was supposed to be be edgy, raw, and street approved. So he pushed Jodeci to go harder, be wilder, and embrace their bad boy image. And guess what? It worked. Jodeci became R&B's rock stars. They were selling out tours, breaking records, and getting co-signs from rappers who saw them as the R&B version of NWA. Even rapper N.O.R.E. called them the Wu-Tang of R&B. But behind the scenes, they weren't being paid, they weren't being managed properly, and no one cared about their mental health. Because the truth is, the industry didn't care what happened to them. As long as the records kept selling, they were free to spiral out of control. And that's exactly what happened. Because once Jodeci fully embraced...
Okay, some of what she's saying true, some of what she's saying false. The thing is, Diddy did help them with their image, but they asked Diddy to help them with the image. They actually came to Diddy with sunglasses. They actually came to Andre Herrera with sunglasses. KC said this in an interview on a podcast that he did with Tank and them. Shout outs to Tank and I believe his name Jay Valentine. But he said they wanted to be anti-Boyz II Men. They didn't want to look like that. They didn't want to have suits on. He said that his own tone. What she talking about? But they said that they wanted to dress like Diddy. How Diddy was dressed, like they saw Diddy or whatever, however it was, and they wanted that imagery. They wanted to be dressed like that. But they had sunglasses when they got that because that's how they felt. You had to look like these stars. We're gonna get to this.
The lifestyle the industry set them up for, that's when the real chaos began. By the early 90s, Jodeci wasn't just famous, they were unstoppable. Platinum albums, sold out shows, industry respect. They were living the dream, right? Wrong. Because behind the scenes, everything was falling apart. KC and JoJo, out of control. Devontae, getting more paranoid by the day. Dalvin, trying to keep the group together but barely holding on. And what did the industry do? Nothing. The more reckless Jodeci got, the more money they made. The more drama, the bigger the headlines. And nobody cared how bad it got, as long as the checks kept coming in. But the thing about living like rock stars, eventually the crash comes. And for Jodeci, it started with Devontae's swing. Devontae's home invasion. The moment. Everything changed. Devontae was more than just a member of Jodeci. He was the musical mastermind, the one who produced their biggest hits, the guy who kept everything together behind the scenes. But one night in 1993, Devontae was attacked in his own home. It wasn't just a robbery, it was brutal. He was tied up, beaten, and left for dead. He fought back so hard that he bit off one of the attacker's fingers, but the damage was already done. Mentally, Devontae was never the same. From that moment on, he started pulling away from the industry. He became paranoid. He stopped showing up to studio sessions. He barely spoke to his own group members. And without Devontae keeping things together, Jodeci started crumbling. But that was just the beginning. Chesa Aldi and Saikino Sowan, Jerry and sorry to hit rock bottom. For years, Devontae's swing was the backbone of Jodeci. He produced their biggest hits. He shaped their signature sound. He discovered Missy Elliott, Timbaland, Genuine, and Static Major before they were legends. But one night changed everything. The attack that broke Devontae. It was July 23rd, 1993, Devontae's 22nd birthday. His crew was celebrating, but Devontae never showed up. His brother Dalvin started getting worried, so he and the rest of Jodeci rushed to his home. What they found was shocking. Devontae was tied up, beaten, bleeding. His house ransacked, completely destroyed. The attackers had stolen $20,000 worth of jewelry. And the worst part, Devontae had fought back so hard, he bit off one of their fingers. That's how brutal this was. What really happened? To this day, nobody knows exactly who set him up. Some say it was a random home invasion. Others say it was an inside job. Someone in the industry wanted to take him down. But what we do know, Devontae was never the same. The aftermath, Devontae's mental spiral. After the attack, he started pulling away from Jodeci. He stopped showing up to studio sessions. He became paranoid, reclusive, and withdrawn. Devontae, the man who once controlled everything in Jodeci, was now barely functioning. And once he checked out, the group had no leader, no direction, no stability. Jodeci was spiraling out of control. And without Devontae holding things together, Casey and JoJo were about to self-destruct. With Devontae mentally checked out, Jodeci was leaderless. And that's when Casey and JoJo's problems exploded. If you thought Devontae's home invasion was bad, what happened to Casey and JoJo was even worse. Because they're down...
Yeah, that thing about that home invasion shit was serious. That nigga actually had to go to the hospital for a while. But he did sign Missy Elliott in them, and from what I heard, he was beating their ass and shit on some weird shit. But I'm assuming that's what it was about, because his ass was paranoid and tweaking out and shit. But damn, I ain't know he had separated from the group like that at the time. I just knew he had got robbed and they had a home invasion. He did bite that nigga finger off, and I knew that they robbed him or whatever, but I didn't know he separated. I thought he had separated because like he was trying to do his own thing, because he was trying to start his own music label at the time also, that thing. That's why he signed them niggas. That's how he discovered them niggas. Got genuine because he sad them as an artist.
All wasn't just one tragic event. It was years of self-destruction, addiction, and chaos. Casey and JoJo, the rise of addiction. At first, the industry saw it as rock star behavior. The partying, the late nights, the alcohol and drugs. But this wasn't just partying. Casey was drinking from the moment he woke up. JoJo was blacking out mid-conversations, and both of them would fire anyone who tried to stop them. Nobody could tell them no. Their label didn't care as long as they kept making hits. Their team, too scared to say anything. And Jodeci's fans had no idea how bad things really were. But then came the breaking point, the Casey and Mary J. Blige disaster. We can't talk about Casey's downfall without talking about Mary J. Blige. Their relationship, toxic, explosive, and full of abuse allegations. Mary was at the top of her career. Casey was one of the biggest R&B stars alive. And behind closed doors, it was a nightmare. Mary later revealed Casey was controlling. He was verbally and physically abusive, and she felt completely trapped. Eventually, she broke free. But for Casey, it was just the beginning of his downfall. JoJo's collapse on stage. By the mid-2000s, Casey and JoJo were barely holding on. They were trying to make a comeback, booking tours, trying to relaunch their careers, pretending everything was fine. But during a 2000...
What the fuck did he do to his fucking hair? Damn. What the fuck? He look like Andre 3000. What the fuck? I never seen this fucking picture of this nigga. What the fuck? That nigga look like Missy Elliott. That nigga look like Eve.
8 concert in Australia, JoJo collapsed.
Back, they did say he was related to Fantasia. That nigga look like Fantasia. Hey.
But during a 2008 concert in Australia, JoJo collapsed. Right in the middle of performing All My Life on stage in front of thousands of fans. Face first, unconscious, and Casey just kept singing like nothing happened. The clip went viral, and suddenly, everyone saw what was really going on. This wasn't a comeback. This wasn't just a bad night. Casey and JoJo were drowning. And what did the industry do? The same thing they always do. They turned their backs on them. IRS problems, arrests, and public humiliation. Casey and JoJo weren't just struggling with addiction, they were also broke. In 2003, they were arrested for not paying their taxes. The state of North Carolina came after them for over $200,000. They were forced to plead guilty to tax evasion, and it became clear they were out of money. And then Casey was arrested for exposing himself at a Jingle Ball concert. JoJo was diagnosed with epilepsy from years of drink, and both of them were struggling to book shows because of their reputation. At this point, Jodeci wasn't just a fallen group, they were a cautionary tale, and their downfall wasn't over yet, because the Jodeci reunion was a complete disaster. By the time the 2010s rolled around, Jodeci was no longer the group that revolutionized R&B. They weren't just washed up, they were broken. Devante was completely off the grid. Casey and JoJo were struggling to stay sober. Dalvin was trying to keep the Jodeci name alive, but no one was listening. So when news broke that Jodeci was reuniting, people were excited, but also skeptical, and unfortunately, they had every reason to be. The Jodeci reunion disaster. In 2014, Timbaland announced he was producing a comeback album for Jodeci. The album, The Past, The Present, The Future, dropped in 2015 under Epic Records. The group was set to perform at the Soul Train Awards. Fans were watching closely. Was Jodeci really back? But when they finally hit the stage, it was a mess. Casey's voice was shot. JoJo was struggling to stay upright.
Yeah, JoJo lost his voice too though. That's the thing. Damn, I ain't know it was this fucking bad though. I know he got epilepsy from that shit. That shit fucked up. You know, it's like a brain situation. Like, so that means he has I believe it's an aneurysm in your brain.
The chemistry was gone. They looked unprepared, disconnected, and lost. And just like that, the reunion was over before it even began. Devante Swing, the mystery. While Casey and JoJo were still somewhat in the public eye, Devante completely disappeared. He stopped doing interviews, he stopped making music, and aside from a few blurry fan photos, he basically became a ghost. The last known footage of him was in 2015, posted by his son, where he was playing the piano. But beyond that, nobody knows where Devante Swing is today. Casey and JoJo, the fight for sobriety. After years of collapsing on stage, going viral for embarrassing moments, and struggling with addiction, Casey and JoJo finally got help. In 2010, they filmed a reality show about getting sober. Casey later suffered multiple strokes but recovered. JoJo was diagnosed with epilepsy, but he finally started to slow down. Today, they're both alive, still making music, and still trying to fix their legacy. But the truth, they'll never be the same. Dalvin's attempt at a solo career. Dalvin was the only member of Jodeci who didn't fully self-destruct. He stayed active in music. He released a solo album in 2000, but it flopped. He tried to keep keep Jodeci together, but the industry had already moved on. At this point, nobody really knows what's next for Jodeci. They still have loyal fans. They still have a legendary catalog. But will they ever come back as a group? It's not looking good. So what really happened to Jodeci? Was it fame? Was it the industry? Or was it their own self-destruction? The truth is, it was all of the above. They were set up. They were exploited. But they also made choices that led to their own downfall. And the saddest part, Jodeci paved the way for nearly every R&B act that came after them, but they never got the respect they deserved. Instead of being celebrated like Boyz II Men, they became a cautionary tale. And now, they're legends. But they're also a what-if story. What if Jodeci had been protected? What if they had the...
First of all, I thought they was gonna go more in depth with this shit, but they didn't. First of all, with the situation with Jodeci is, niggas was taking them on like sex situations where like, they'll be with Aaron Hall, the singer from Guy, and they'll be kicking it with him, and he'll take them to a room and take a bitch with him, and he'll just fuck the bitch in front of them, make them record it or some shit, like some weird shit like that happened. Like they was low key putting them in like certain predicament situations that later on down the line kind of put them in other situations, in court and shit. Because when the P Diddy situation now happened, somebody tried to call Devontae to the stand, but he said he had nothing to do with nothing. He said he was there, but he said he didn't know what the fuck was going on for real. Which I could believe because he was new to the industry. These niggas didn't know nothing. They hadn't even put an album out yet when they was like kicking it with these niggas. They was singing background for niggas on their records and shit. When they first got signed to Uptown. That was another thing too. Like they never went into them getting signed to Uptown or how they got signed to Uptown. They got signed to Uptown due to the fact that Devontae write majority of those songs. So I don't know what they was talking about because they wasn't coming out as a gospel, but they made love songs. It's just they didn't want to come out like Boyz II Men, and they didn't want to have a soft image. They wanted a hardcore. They wanted to be different. They wanted to be edgy because they fucked with Bobby Brown. If y'all know Bobby, y'all know how Bobby gets down. So that was who they was fucking with at the time. That was who they was trying to like concept their group around. Jodeci is literally just all of the initials put together except for Dalvin's. But thing is, niggas need to understand that the group as a whole come from the church, but they didn't push church music when they got to the industry. They was making R&B music. Devontae already wrote majority of that album except for Get On Up. That's the only song he didn't write, and he didn't write a verse on Forever My Lady. And then that was the part where he say, "So you having my baby." Then when KC singing that, he's singing a part that Al B. Sure wrote. Al B. Sure is the father of Quincy Jones, Quincy, who was P Diddy quote unquote stepson. But yeah, that nigga basically helped them produce that album also. But that's the thing. The album was pretty much done when they brought it to the industry. They just didn't have an image. They came with the sunglasses trying to build an image, and then they tried to build an image based on the fashion they were seeing when they got to New York. But other than that, I don't know what the fuck she was talking about. I don't know what the fuck this video was really on. They didn't really say too much other than the fact like they had their little health problems and shit, and they struggles with alcohol addiction, which ultimately led to JoJo losing his voice. But yeah, they did drink the fuck away from their life and career. They drunk everything out of their shit. They fucked up the group through alcohol. They fucked up everything through alcohol. Their voice, health, all type. I really think niggas need to do more focusing on some of these groups, because if you pay more attention to some of these niggas in the past, you might see how motherfuckers can avoid some of these situations in the future. Because like a lot of these niggas, like she said, it's a cautionary tale for motherfuckers to see what the fuck can happen to you if you fucking around and getting too caught up in like bullshit and it consume you. But y'all give me y'all thoughts. I'm gonna leave the link in the description. Understand what worth is. These niggas is